Welcome to Know Your Food, the podcast where we explore the world of food by speaking with farmers, makers, entrepreneurs, and experts who are reshaping how we think about what we eat. I'm your host, Michael Ray Robinoff, CEO and co-founder of Farm to People, and we're recording these conversations live from our warehouse in Bushwick, Brooklyn. Through this podcast, we're taking it a step further to dive into the stories behind the food on your plate and the industry as a whole. On today's episode, we're speaking with John Eng, the founder of Hudson Valley Fisheries, an indoor aquaculture facility in Hudson, New York that sustainably raises steelhead trout. There is so much confusion when it comes to buying seafood. We wanted to sit down with an expert and try to understand the differences between farm-raised and wild-caught. It turns out there are some major misconceptions about what farm-raised seafood can be. In our conversation, we get into the issues of overfishing, what sustainable seafood production really looks like, why the United States is an importer and exporter of seafood, and why John chose steelhead trout as his first fish to raise. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Be sure to subscribe for future episodes. All right, without further ado, welcome, John.
Thank you for having me.
I love your product so much, so I'm so excited that you have the chance to be here this evening. I believe Farm to People and Hudson Valley Fisheries have been working together for, I want to say like four years. And yeah, fell in love with your fish. As I told you, he's got a beautiful fish farm right outside of Hudson, New York. Super awesome town to visit. As you drive into town, you can't miss this amazing fish farm. So I'm really excited for you to be here. And yeah.
No, no, thank you. Really, thank you for this chance for me to come and really expose what we do to all these people here. And really, I enjoy talking about what we do. It's been a labor of love. We've been at this a little over 10 years now, and hard times and good times. It's been a great learning experience, and I think overall we've made such an impact, not just to our industry, but also to, I think we pushed the word out here in New York. What we do and how we do it's most important thing is how we do this, right?
Absolutely. So on today's episode, because the whole idea of this podcast is to really like help all of us collectively understand our food. Fish, as a general category, is very misunderstood and confusing. I think you've got, whether it's wild, whether it's local, whether it's farmed, you've got all of these different labels, all of this confusion. So I just want to start off as a sort of like laying the ground for all of us here. I'd love to understand from your perspective and the definition of what is farmed seafood and what is wild catch.
Sure. I think don't be afraid that you are confused about seafood, because I think most everybody is, even industry veterans can be confused about these terms because they cover such a broad aspect of everything we do. When I talk about farmed, there is a romanticized version of this, and then there's a more realistic version or even a negative version. When people think about farmed, unfortunately, a lot of people think that it's these really unclean, very industrial, very condensed operations in a third world country that producing very questionable products, right? And there are plenty of those operations out there. And unfortunately, people see that for the most part, there are really good looking operations. You see net pen operations, these nets out in very pristine areas of the world, New Zealand, Norway, where you see snow-capped mountains, and you think they're raising these wonderful product out in these clear, clean waters. And then you got operations like mine, where it's in a warehouse. We do under very controlled conditions. The major benefit of raising fish indoors is that we keep all the pests, all the predators, and parasites and disease away from our crop. So we actually do raise a more clean and pure product in my mind, right?
Yeah, super interesting. I guess the second thing I would say is when you think of seafood, personally, I don't think of the Hudson Valley. So I think really interesting to like think about that. And Why did you, is there a reason you chose the Hudson Valley? Obviously, you could have chosen anywhere, I guess, because you're in indoor, seafood farm, but why the Hudson Valley?
Well, one, I've been a New Yorker for 46 of my 50 years here on this planet, so it's natural for me to be here at home. But when we talk about the land-based fish farming, one of the chief benefits of it is being able to grow and produce our product close to market. We want to reduce the carbon footprint of what we do. Being able to ship my food, our fish down to market in 2 hours drive, it's a huge, huge difference. One of the things I talk about this at different universities. I've held little lectures here and there. One of the things I consider is the Monterey Bay Aquarium has a carbon footprint calculator for the shipment of your fish. And I think for every mile that a fish flies, it's about a ton of carbon dioxide that's released in the air. Wow. So if you think about fish that's flying in from British Columbia, that's about 2,500 miles. That's 2,500 tons of CO2 in the air. 3,300 from Norway, 55 from Chile. But for me to truck my fish down from the town of Hudson down to New York City, it's 2 hours drive on a truck. That amounts to about 130 tons of CO2 versus 2,000, 3,000, 5,000. It doesn't even compare on scale. So you think about the sustainability of impact on the environment, this aspect alone, being close to market is a huge benefit.
Yeah. As a lifelong New Yorker, I think I'm curious. I'm always curious about the founding story. I'm always curious about the people behind the food. How did you get into creating Hudson Valley Fisheries?
Well, there's nothing about it that makes sense. My family company is actually, of all things, it's metals recycling. My father is really that American success story. He came to this country, a family of four to support, nothing in his pocket. He had like $500 in his pocket. And he started a scrap metal company here in Greenpoint in '86, and just luck, hard work, really made a success. And over 30 some odd years, we expanded, and we've been really successful in terms of metals recycling, what we call asset recovery these days. About 2013, we were looking for ideas to diversify our business. And being foodies, loving to eat, you join our company, a Fortune company, we call it the Fortune 15, like the freshman 15. You gain 15 pounds in the first few months working because we like to eat, right? We enjoy our food so much. In that aspect, we met a number of contacts that exposed us to aquaculture. Our thinking at the time was that I was personally exposed and know about the ongoing pressures we put on our oceans. And the term, the phrase that I use, it's running dry. We overfish quite heavily. And we thought this methodology of raising fish would be an answer to that. It would help reduce the pressure on the oceans. It would bring production close to market. And honestly, one of the benefits I saw during COVID was how important it is to our food systems, to our food security, having production close to home, right?
Yeah, I think we all saw that with supply chains. The supply chain breaks. You really need supply networks. You need things to be more regionally focused. And our infrastructure, you're right, cannot support that. And I think with more climate catastrophes probably coming ahead, we do need to think more about the strength of our regional food systems. Yeah.
It's our goal to try to promote a lot of this production in its various forms to the local economy too.
Yeah. I think we're not your typical audience. We care a ton about how our food is created. Yeah. And I think what you mentioned earlier, net pens and typical issues with farmed fish. Mm-hmm. I think you have a really interesting recirculating aquaculture system.
Yes.
I've heard you say it, RAS. So we're going to talk about RAS. We talk a lot about regenerative agriculture, the importance of biodynamic farming, the importance of all of the sort of inputs that go into the farm and outputs getting re-input back into the system, so you're not creating a lot of waste. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really cool, and I want you to share more about how you're doing that with farmed fish to really create a more sustainable fish farming operation.
So if you take a look at our website, HudsonValleyFisheries.com, what you see is not exactly the ideal image of what fish farming is, But I believe it's the next step, right? You see a tank where I'm raising fish inside of a fairly industrial-looking like building, right? And there are 54 tanks in my system, ranging from small 8-foot diameter nursery tanks and stepping up 2 times until a very large 45-foot diameter grow-out tanks. And what these systems are basically we're completely replicating the environment for our fish, right? It's everybody thinks, has an idea if it's an aquarium. And in a sense it is, but it's a lot of waste treatment and life support. Our goal is to make the conditions for our fish really optimum for their growing. They grow fast, they grow healthy, and ultimately produce a really good, clean tasting product, right?
Yeah, and I think getting into that really delicious, clean tasting product, which I can attest to, you have this sort of like interesting consumer problem. You kind of see tuna, salmon, shrimp, like I'd say those are the big three.
Yes.
And every other fish basically has a branding problem. Maybe cod sneaks in, but like we sell a whole bunch of different types of fish, and I can point to our sales. It's salmon and shrimp all day long, like by a pretty stark margin. How do you convince a population that seems problematically committed to these two fish, which are largely the problematic fish that are farmed in the conditions that we all probably don't want to support, and except not the ones we sell, but by and large the ones that are consumed globally. To me, the first time I tried steelhead trout, and it is a trout, but it's vibrantly orange. It really appears a lot like salmon. If you taste it, it's delicious. How do you, as an entrepreneur, as a business person, start to convince people that this is a worthwhile alternative for their plate?
Well, we're in all the New York markets in the city. I think when I walk through it and I speak to my staff, there's always people who question that. It's like, I only buy wild caught. But kind of to go back to your first question about my definition of wild caught, and that's similar to how I say farming. It's really encompasses a broad range. And I think when people think it's wild caught, they have this romanticized version, like it's Billy Joel's Down Easter Alexa. You got a fisherman family that's been doing it for umpteen generations, right? But the reality of that is most wild caught fish are these industrial trawlers catching tens of thousands of tons of fish in our waters, and not just the particular target fish, but everything else in those nets, right? It's a big factory boat. It's caught, it's processed, it's frozen, it's boxed on the same boat, goes to port, flies over here. It's really not that appealing, and the impact to the environment is kind of horrific because of all the bycatch that comes from it, right? But really, our biggest selling point at Hudson Valley is that it's fresh. You can't get fresher than what we do because we harvest. When we're very, very busy, we harvest 2 days a week. But most of the time, we harvest 1 day a week, typically on a Thursday. They'll be at the market by Saturday, It's about 48 hours. It could be 24 hours, depending on the form which you want to order. You want to order a whole fish, it could be at your door next day. Right?
Yeah.
So it really can't beat the freshness of our fish. Right.
Totally. It makes a lot of sense. I think also, as you think about the different ways to get your fish into people's homes, it's really interesting that beyond selling fresh fish, you've also gone into cold smoked fish like similar to a smoked salmon. You have a ground trout as well, so similar, like make like a fish burger. What is that, like just using up all of the different components of the fish, or is it also trying to just like widen people's imagination around the use cases of your fish?
It's both. It took us a while to get there. When it comes to our business, I wanted to be good at one thing first. I wanted to make sure I grow a good, tasty fish first, fresh. And once I got to a point, that not that I'm doing it this time, but I'm doing it every time, right? And I felt the confidence to, okay, let's see what else we can offer, what else we can do, how we can utilize the fish so that we come close to 100% utility, right?
Totally. I'll stop talking about the specific type of fish, but I want to ask one more question. I'm just genuinely interested. You have 50 tanks in the Hudson Valley. You could have put anything in them, like any type of fish. So why steelhead?
Well, at the time we did this, going back to 2013, when we started our due diligence, when we looked into this, really, of course, we wanted to do Atlantic salmon, which is what everybody orders and what everybody wants. I think it's only second to shrimp, like you said, shrimp or tuna. It's those three are always kind of the top. But with these particular systems and this growing methodology, Atlantic salmon doesn't work too well at the time. The Atlantic salmon, they are an ocean-run species. You do need a salt cycle. You also need a controlled light cycle. We chose steelhead because at the time we looked at it, there are some proven systems and there's some history. Steelhead is a very hardy fish. They grow well. We thought trying to reduce our risk of mortality and whatnot, so we chose something that I physically saw works in these systems.
Awesome. Yeah. Scale is something most businesses need, but it's also something that often leads to a degradation of quality. And I think that's something we consider a lot at Farm to People. We want more and more, our whole idea and our vision is to help more customers eat a more sustainable diet, supporting more small farmers, small makers. At the same time, the more people that adopt this way of eating also put more demand on these small farmers and small makers, and will grow our network. But there's sort of a weird paradox there. And I'm just curious, how do you envision scale for your business? Does that look like multiple micro fish farms around? How do you play with that sort of?
Well, the benefit of starting in New York, here in the Northeast, I think we are within 8 hours of 50 million people. It's basically a one-day delivery circle. We want to put our fish in a box, send it to someone's door, and I want it there the next day. I don't want to take 2 days or 3 days in there. Being in the Hudson Valley, we can get from Boston to not quite DC. We can come to Brooklyn. We can come to Brooklyn. It makes it easy for the BQE, I guess. But we can reach Philly, or we can get Buffalo. So we have a good reach in the Hudson Valley. And for me, there's still so much room to scale. We barely touched this market, I think. So it really gives me the opportunity to build a larger facility here in the Northeast that can fulfill this demand from Washington to Montreal. Right.
And what size facility can service what type of growth? I'm curious.
One of the best things we do is we've spent 11 years figuring out process, understanding our fish. Everything we do in our systems is tied to understanding what steelhead trout needs to grow well. Between water temperature, water quality, the feed that it likes to do, prefers, the growing conditions, we understand this particular species very well. Having done it for 11 years, we know how to gear up and scale up to maintain that quality, even at larger scales.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing. I think a lot about this question as someone whose mission it is to change the way people eat food and think about where their food comes from. And we're a tiny fish. I believe it's important to the future of our food system and the importance of the future of our environment that we do scale, but it's also our responsibility to scale well and not hurt the ecosystems we're pledging to help. On that note, what's really cool, because fish that are farmed need feed, and that's amazing, especially and this is not fish, but last week we talked about chicken and the crazy, devastating avian flu that's going around so many places.
17 million birds, I heard this morning.
17 million birds. And even in Long Island, there's a farm, Crescent Farm, which is a duck farm, now facing the issue that they might have to put down their 100,000 birds and could go out of business.
It's like they find one case in the flock and the whole flock has to go. It's crazy, and it hurts right here.
It really hurts, yeah. And I think you're you have a flock of fish, and you're intimately aware of what that would mean financially to have to put every fish down. But I think this is so important, and it comes to how you care for your fish, what you feed your fish. Your fish are free of hormones, antibiotics, GMOs, toxic chemicals. Talk about that, how that's important to the sustainability of your fish and what you feed your fish as well.
Really, the idea is that, like I said before, we have a fish tank, we put a roof over it, we keep the environment out, we maintain the growing atmosphere and conditions to be optimal. There's no sharks hunting our fish. There's no bears. There's no parasites in our systems. We bring in fish eggs, hatch those eggs from day one, grow them out throughout the system. We don't bring in water to where our egg suppliers. We don't bring in their water because there's a risk that water can contain parasites or disease or something. In fact, one of the things that constantly blow my mind is that these fish eggs, fertilized fish eggs, come in dry. They're in a styrofoam container, which I don't like, but it comes in, it's shipped next day from Washington State. We actually can wash it in an iodine solution to make sure there's no disease on it before we introduce it to our systems, right? That's how clean we want to keep our environment. And by doing so, we don't need antibiotics because they're not exposed to the wild diseases that impact fish as if I was growing out in the wild. Ultimately, what my product represents to me is a really clean form of steelhead trout. I think it's better than wild caught because wild caught you have the pollutants of our oceans in that fish as well. Right? So doing what I'm doing here is really eliminating all the pollution sources.
Interesting. Yeah. Microplastics in our fish is definitely
absolutely.
Wait, I'm curious. You said the fish eggs. I'm imagining like caviar, like you're getting a shipment of caviar.
It's eye eggs. You look at it, there's actually eyes. The fish the embryo has developed eyes. It does look just like, what's served on sushi. It looks very, very tasty, but it is eye eggs. And for a short period of time in that development cycle of the egg, that egg is actually very, very hardy. It can survive transportation, coming out of the water for a couple of days. That's the time they tend to ship it to the farms around the world, right?
Yeah. Wow. Zooming out to like the globalization of our food system a little bit more, I want to like understand a little bit more about what are like the challenges that you see over the coming years, and like if you're trying to be like a conscious eater, especially in the world of seafood, what are some of the like most common pitfalls that people are making that you're just like, oh my God, if people only knew?
I think the first thing is this hesitation or pushback against farm fish. In just about the time we started, about 2013, 2014, I think worldwide aquaculture had started producing more fish than wild catch. I'm not negative towards farm or wild as a category. To me, net pen operations today, when they're done well, actually it's meeting the world's demand for seafood, and it's absolutely necessary. When you talk about developed nations like Norway, Scotland, Europe, they produce a very, very good product. They don't allow antibiotics in Norway and Europe. They allow vaccines. It's necessary. It's proven harmless. But the products that's coming out of developed nations is a very good product. It's third world countries where there's weak regulatory systems, that gives an opportunity for questionable product to slip into our supply streams.
I know Europe has always been really progressive and also really sort of useful in their product labeling, their regulation. Yeah. You're talking about some more developing nations that have issues with their sort of regulation. Just because of where we are in America right now, and a new administration, and I think regulations on all of our mind. I'm just sort of curious, like, how are you regulated now, and how do you feel the regulation? This is not a political podcast, but I'm curious. It sort of begs the question, like, how do you view American fish farms and the regulation that goes along with that?
For the most part, America farms, we have catfish, mostly farming-wise, it's shellfish, shrimp, and freshwater fish. But we're way behind Canada, and we're extremely far behind Europe in terms of our fish, aquaculture and fish farming, right? Operations overseas and up north are the entire industry, from education to production, is a little way ahead of us here in the U.S., the U.S. is the marketplace.
For the consumers of that fish.
We're the consumers of that fish. We still import 80-85% of what we eat. We export 70-75% of what we produce. It's it's
Not a
strange.
very local food system.
No,
yeah.
not very local food systems. We're still pork chops, chicken patties, and burgers most of the day, right?
For sure, for sure. Yeah. I think I'm really interested to know like what you have in store at Hudson Valley Fisheries. Talk to me about the future. What does your ideal future look like? What gets you excited, both for your business and just the food system writ large?
Good one. I look forward to actually expanding on what we're doing. We need to grow. I feel like I said before, we're just scratching this market. We're not producing enough to fill New York alone. There's still Boston, there's still DC, there's still everywhere in between. There's still so much that we can reach. As I mentioned with COVID, May of 2020 was a real eye-opener for me. Overnight, basically, all our restaurant customers, 60% of my customers disappeared. That shutdown really hurt us. But it forced me to pivot. We went to farmers markets, we went direct. And the wonderful thing about that is that it made me reach out to the individuals. We reach out to our consumers instead of our chef customers. We reached out to the mouths that our fish are reaching. Yeah. And that was actually became what's important. As we grow our facility and as I look to the future, putting out that message, putting out the word is becoming more and more important to me. Right.
Yeah, I love that. And I also think you're absolutely right. Like putting your fish on some of New York City's best restaurant menus is always a great way to introduce people to your product. Mm-hmm. I think especially with fish, I don't know why, but a lot of people I do think are more insecure about cooking fish at home. Like I feel like I don't know why that is. We hear that occasionally, mm-hmm. and I guess that's a challenge. It's also an opportunity. And if you go to a great restaurant, you try something that was created for you, you want to go home and emulate it. So there's also that beautiful marketing angle.
Yeah, that's one of the things. When I first started, I will refrain from mentioning the number of fish it took me to practice how to fillet properly or gut properly. But that is that's absolute hurdle. No one here needs to, take a cow to a steak. But for fish, it's different. People, if anyone's fished, know how to, you caught your own fish, you know how to gut a fish, you know how to fillet a fish. But that's still a hurdle for most people to how to buy a whole fish from the market. People don't. They want a fillet. They want it nice and simple. And wonderful thing about trout or salmon, it's when you have that fillet, it's actually quite easy to cook. And there's many different ways to cook it, but it makes it easy when it's in that nice filleted form.
For sure. We sell both the fillet and the whole fish, and I'm proud of our customers because I think they sell pretty evenly. So we have some adventurous cooks.
Great.
So that's awesome. Closing question. This is maybe going to become our
the last
thing.
One, right?
You made it. We made it. I'm always interested because at the end of the day, we're producing food, and that's our job, and we're feeding mm-hmm. folks. But we also, this is the most amazing thing about being in this industry, is we're also human and we also eat. I'm always interested in your personal ethos, for how you source food for you and your family. Because that, at the end of the day, a lot of people come to us and are confused about where to shop and how to shop. And so, I love to hear how you and your family do it.
I know there's, I want to talk a little bit about certifications. I don't like it in terms of it's becoming something we live or die by. It's not what I like because we rely on some of these certification bodies to say, hey, don't trust my word alone. Here's a third party to say what my product is. It's becoming a thing. It's been a thing. People look for some certification that the fish they're buying or the products they're buying it has some integrity behind it. We abide by a number of them. The best one I think we follow is Monterey Bay Aquarium and Seafood Watch. They look at both the species as well as the growing method to kind of label it, whether it's green for good or red for bad, kind of simplifying things like that. That's a good way of kind of judging how you want to buy your seafood. BAP, that's Best Aquaculture Practices, also has certifications. Then there's MSC and ASC. But if you look for it, you can at least trust that there's a third party kind of making the hard look, hard homework for you, right?
Yeah, no, it's helpful to know. There's a lot of
Yeah.
labels. It's hard to decipher them.
In general, well, hell, I'm Chinese. There's nothing that that my palate really avoids. I try everything. But really, I look at it in terms of balance. My family wants a more balanced diet. And it's not just fish. It's everything. We try a little bit of everything, but nothing to the extreme.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
One more bonus question. Just
Sure.
wild card. I just think it's fun.
Yeah.
I looked at your LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You do more than fish. You also, side hustle, you have a marijuana business. Share a little bit about that.
Fish is hard work, and here's the fun part.
Yeah.
No, when I started Hudson Valley Fish Farms, aquaponics was always in the vision. It was always in my mind to do some produce, some horticultural product. Because the wonderful thing about aquaculture and the systems, the land-based fish farm, is that we can absolutely collect and utilize all the waste streams from fish operations. The uneaten food and the feces, we screen out, we compost it. The water, we have biological systems that convert the ammonia into nitrites and then to nitrates, which is actually important fertilizer for plants. Even carbon dioxide. In our systems, we have the ability to collect the carbon dioxide that we have to take out off gas from the water to reoxygenate it. Right? We have the ability to collect that carbon dioxide and feed it into a greenhouse. So it's always been in my vision to pair a greenhouse operation to the fish farm. I had no inclination, it wasn't even a thought to do first hemp and then to cannabis later on. But with 2018, 2019, when the hemp program came about, and then 2020 when cannabis came about, we were one of the first to be able to take advantage of our growing methodology to actually leverage a license into another new industry, you know.
I love that.
Keep me on my toes.
Yeah. Well, John, thank you so much for joining. You're an inspiration.
No, thank you.
It's really
Thank
cool
you.
to dig in more to what you're building at Hudson Valley Fisheries.
Sure.
And yeah, we're honored to be a partner, and hopefully everyone enjoys this conversation.
Yeah. No, thank you again.
Thank you for listening to Know Your Food, a podcast from farm to people. If today's conversation got you thinking differently about what's on your plate or where it comes from, we'd love if you shared this episode with a friend or left us a review. It helps more people discover the folks reimagining the future of food from the ground up. And if you're in the New York tri-state area, you can shop from our network of small, regenerative, independent farms and makers at farmtopeople.com and stay in the loop by signing up for our newsletter or joining us on Instagram at farmtopeople. Until next time, eat well and know your food.